This video is to take a closer look at the pectoral girdle, the girdle associated with the upper appendage or the arm, the upper extremity, it's also called that. This is part of the appendicular skeleton. The appendicular skeleton is the girdles and also the bones of the upper and lower extremities. This bone right here that you see in the front is the clavicle. You remember that from the previous video. This is the scapula. Those are the only two bones that are involved in the pectoral girdle. You see this bone over here is part of the upper appendage or arm, and the head of this humerus, remember that's the humerus bone, is going into that scapula. So let's take a look at each of these bones. Let's look, and there's only two bones in the pectoral girdle, the clavicle and the scapula. Now the clavicle right here has a body. This is called the body of the scapula. This end right here is called the sternal end, because the sternal end goes into the sternum or the breastbone. We're going to look at that more when we look at the axial skeleton. Okay, so that end is the sternal end, then the rest of it is the body, and this end right here is called the acromial end. This end of the clavicle is called the acromial end. Now this is the scapula, and to take a closer look at the scapula, I have one right over here, and let's take a good look at the scapula. Okay, it's also sometimes called the shoulder bone. The clavicle is called the collarbone. Okay, and the reason why is, let's take a look at this. This is the anterior portion of the scapula. It's important to get anterior, means the front, separated from the back. This is the posterior aspect of the scapula, and the posterior aspect has the spine. This is called the scapular spine, this area right here. So let's look at the anterior side first. There actually are two big processes that stick out. This process right here, the process is something that sticks out on a bone. That's called the coracoid process. And this process is called the acromial process. The coracoid process is anterior to the acromial process. Okay, and so that they look very different. Take a good look at them. This is the coracoid process. This is the acromial process. Okay, then the margins of the bone, this is called the medial margin toward the middle of the body. This part is called the lateral margin, and this is called the superior margin. Okay, now there is no inferior margin. See where my finger is touching down here? That's called the inferior angle. Okay, and then the other thing is, this is called the subscapular fossa. It goes down. Feel it. It goes down. So we got the lateral margin, the medial margin, the superior margin, the inferior angle. Okay. Now while we're looking at it, there's one more thing, and this is the scapular notch. This part right here is called the scapular notch. Now if we look at it from the side, we see this surface right here which is called the glenoid cavity or the glenoid fossa. Either one is okay. Okay. So then you have a tubercle, a little bump up here, which is called the supraglenoid tubercle, and a little tubercle down here, which is called the infraglenoid tubercle. Okay. This glenoid fossa is where the head of the humerus goes in for articulation. That's where the ball and socket movement comes in. Okay, so now the last thing we have to do is look at the posterior aspect of the scapula. I hope you recognize that as the posterior aspect of it. Okay, this one right here in the back, that is the acromial. I'm sorry, I mixed myself up. That's okay. When the teacher gets mixed up, then that's good, because you can see anybody could get mixed up with it. This one in the front is called the coracoid process. The one in the back is the acromial process. Okay, and coming down from the acromial process is the scapular spine. Okay, this is the supraspinous fossa above the spine, and this is the infraspinous cavity below the spine. So this right here is your acromial process. The spine comes down from it. We're in the posterior aspect. This is the supraspinous fossa. This is the infraspinous fossa. Also, let's review. We can look at this again. Okay, this is the lateral margin. This is the inferior angle. This is the medial margin. This up here is the superior margin, and you can't see it so good from the back, but there is the scapular notch. Okay, there's the scapular notch. So those are the bones of the pectoral girdle, just two of them, the clavicle or collarbone and the scapula or shoulder bone. Kind of fits around frame. If I had one on the other side, I'd have big ears.